In this video, I'm going to be getting ready for Legion Imperialis by printing off some terrain and also some little tiny tanks and men as well. I've been getting really excited about the small form factor stuff, and I've always liked printing things off at 15mm scale. Been very tempted to go even smaller and do some like old school epic. So when Games Workshop announced that they were bringing out Legion Imperialis, I got really excited. A little bit sad that it's all going to be just 30k, so it's pretty much going to be Marines and just all of the Astra Militarum. But still, it's going to be tiny little soldiers and tanks and everything on the battlefield. So to help out with this project, Aceaddity also sent over a whole bunch of their filament and resin as well. It's not a sponsored video, but they kindly sent me over all their bits as well just to use to basically get all my terrain and everything printed. So originally, I was just going to print off loads of terrain as I get used to it, and then I was going to get the starter box from Games Workshop, but unfortunately that got delayed. So here we are, and I needed to print off some little tiny soldiers as well. So the first thing I needed to do was figure out what I actually wanted to print off. And the one thing that I wanted was something that I could just put together on a battlefield and just have a lot of fun with. I'll have all the links to the STL files and everything down below as well. But the first thing that I found was this series, which basically, there's a whole bunch of buildings that you can print off, and loads of these road systems as well. And the great thing about these is, the roads all like interlock together, so then they kind of stick together nicely. And there's a whole load of different things that you get with this. Perhaps the most impressive thing is that all these buildings are free of charge, so you can download the whole set of buildings and you don't have to pay anything. So I basically got those, and then I bought their pack, so I had all the road systems, and that also gives you things like these tiles as well, so you have all these squares and everything, and you can basically build out your whole city ready to get all your buildings and everything onto. So I downloaded all of my terrain files, and then I wanted to bump them up. So as standard, these come at 6mm, and I wanted them all to be at 8mm to fit with the new Legion Imperialis. So I threw them into my slicers and bumped them up to 133% scale. Now the original plan was that all of like the road systems and everything was going to be done on an FDM printer, and then all of the buildings and stuff was going to be done on my resin printers. In hindsight, as I get to the end of this project, I have done a mix of them as well just to try them out, but the buildings worked out better being printed in FDM, and then the road systems worked out much better in resin, in my opinion. Now this is down to a combination of things that A, I'm more attuned to using a resin 3D printer, and I don't particularly have my FDM printer dialed in that well, but the end results were that it was much smoother from the top down, and they all just clipped together really nicely. This Aceaddity resin doesn't really have any shrinkages or warpages or anything like that. It all fits really nicely together, so I was very, very happy with the road system when it was done in resin, not so much when it was done in FDM. For the buildings, however, looked fantastic in FDM, and they fit really nicely. Like, they've got all these bits in the top here, so it like slides open. So if you want to throw some dice or like units and stuff like that, you can throw them in there. Now, one great thing about this is pretty much everything printed perfect. I didn't have any issues with it, like nothing fell off the supports and stuff like that, which is always good. And also as well, when you're printing these tiny little things, you kind of expect you'll get some breakages. And when I got to the painting stage, because they're so tiny, I never seem to use, like a painting handle. I dropped them so many times and they didn't break, so that's always a bonus. For all of the terrain, I kept it simple at this stage because obviously I'm going to be doing some more stuff in the future. So I just spray painted them all black, and then I used my airbrush to put some grey over the top of them. Really simple at this stage, and I'll add more detail when I get into it further on, but that's where they're at the moment. I did mention that I wasn't really going to print any units or any tanks or anything like that because I was hoping by this stage of doing this video that the box set will be available, but it's not currently. So I printed off these, I think the Galactic Crusaders, and they're really, really cool. They're absolutely tiny, and the detail is fantastic. I'm not entirely sure if they're the exact right scale, and I'll find out obviously once we get that box set in the future, but I've got to say, they came out beautifully. They're detailed enough to look fantastic at this scale, but they're not overly detailed. Like in the past, when I do my 15mm projects, I tend to shrink down full-size miniatures. But with this, you start to get all these extra bits of detail that are hard to get to. So I got them all printed off, and I also downloaded these bases as well, and they've got like 5 little holes in them, so you can just drop them into it. So I'll have the link for the base down below as well for you. And then I got them all primed. So for this, I just primed them all black, and then I grabbed a couple of my airbrush paints. I had to decide what colours I was going to go for, and I decided I wanted to go Emperor's Children. I really like that combination of like the purple and gold. Now in the past few videos, I've done lots of Ultramarines, I've also done a lot of Blood Angels as well, but I wanted to do something from one of the Traitor Legions, and they're probably my favourite, the Emperor's Children, when it comes to Traitor Legions, because they don't feel as stupid as the vast majority of the other Traitor Legions. They're just really indulgent and up themselves. I like that. That's the reason why they fell. They just, they wanted a little bit of fun and to become even more self-indulgent. So they did. So I grabbed some army paint airbrush paint, blasted them with some purple. I did like a darker purple and then a light purple from above, but that didn't really show through in the end result, so I wish I'd gone for a really, really bright purple over the top, and that would have made it much better in the final product. And once I'd done my airbrushing, I went over to my painting station and I grabbed a paintbrush. So I added some silvers, some golds as well to like the Terminators, and then I tried something which didn't work, but it could if you were maybe a little bit more precise. I decided for the eyes on the Terminators, I want them to be like glowing green. I'm not good at doing eyes on 32mm scale, so doing them at like 8mm is just insane. But what I did for this, I tried to do a bit of a hack, and I went with this like greeny oil wash, and I figured I could dab that in there and it'd run into the eyes, and it did run into the eyes. But it also ran into like all the crevice around the helmet and stuff like that, so I was doing loads of cleanup, and every time I was cleaning it up, I was pulling it out of the eyes, so it became a bit of a mess. It could work if you had a really small brush, and you could load it with enough oil to drop it in there, but I didn't want to risk any of my good brushes because oils tend to destroy your brushes. So I got them to that stage and then I left them there. And like the terrain, that's not like their final form or anything like that. I need to do some more work on the bases, maybe pick out a few more details. But because this is just starting and I want to make sure they're the right scale and figuring it all out, and also want to get you guys to let me know what you want me to do next, I left them there so that way I could have a bit of a play with them in the future. Oh, I also decided to do something a little bit weird. I wanted something where I could change out all the terrain and everything underneath it really quickly, and instead of having like a battle mat, I could have something that's a little bit more interactive. Not just for this project, but for lots of other projects in the future. So one of my friends came over and we put together this TV frame to basically have a virtual tabletop and have a lot of fun with. It's pretty simple at the moment. I'm just waiting for an acrylic sheet to go over the front of it. But basically the idea is I can plug in a laptop, do some virtual gaming, but also have some really quick and easy battlefields as well for all the mini stuff. So that way when I'm not using the 3D printed terrain, I can change things out completely and just have a lot of fun with it. So expect to see that in some videos in the future. And then it was time to get them all arranged so I could see what they looked like and then go from there. And I would say, I really, really do like this scale. It's a lot of fun if you're looking for something that's going to give you really large scale battles. So lots and lots of units on the tabletop, easy to grab terrain and things like that. It's a great option. When it comes to printing terrain, it seems kind of daunting at first. And it kind of is if you're printing at 32mm. To print off like a whole building, that's going to use up a lot of filament or a lot of resin. Obviously, there's other ways you can do it, but when you're printing at this scale, it doesn't take up much. So I was able to print off a whole batch of these, and it barely made a dent in my filament or my resins. So it can really give you some detailed battlefields and just some terrain to play with. When it comes to all the units and stuff like that, you can print off a whole host of different things as well. But I'm really excited to see what Games Workshop starter set's going to be like and any of the other bits as well that I can play with. So hopefully once that goes live for a pre-order, I'll be able to get my hands on one of those and we'll go from there. So that's what I've got so far. And the idea is that I'm going to build out loads more different things. But I want to know, what do you guys want me to print to go along with the new Legions Imperialis? Do you want more buildings and like a huge cityscape? Do you want different types of vehicles and everything else like that? Would you like me to try and make, I don't know, like a big starport or something? I'm not too sure which direction to take this in at the moment, so it would be really great to have some feedback. You guys let me know what you want me to experiment with, and also, are there any files out there that you've looked at and gone, I'd love to print that or buy that, but actually it's a bit daunting to do, and maybe I could take it on as a challenge. Thanks so much for Aceaddity for sending this over. The filament's really good, it seems robust, everything kind of clips in very nicely as well, which is always a bonus. And the resin is really nice to work with. It comes with this little baggie, it's easy to pour, easy to work with. I had no issues with failures and stuff like that, so that's always a bonus. And yeah, it's helped me to print off some tiny little men, tiny little tanks, and tiny little buildings. Considering some of the size of these buildings, for them not to fall off the build plate or fail halfway through a print, that's always a bonus. So thanks for watching, throw down your suggestions in the comments below, and yeah, look forward to the next one.